36 hours on, seeing the images of that car careering down that road and with so many people around it, I mean, it doesn't get less shocking, does it?
Appalling. And it's still extraordinary that so far nobody's died.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, a lethal weapon is a car, a big car, driven by somebody we can't impute to... It seemed intent on causing harm. Amazing. Horrific.
And obviously more details emerging. And, you know, as a number of the papers are reporting, The Sun this morning, the driver accused of ramming the crowds was thought to be high on drugs when he gained access by tailgating an ambulance. That was the police report yesterday. Obviously, they have until lunchtime today to continue questioning him. But it doesn't get any less alarming. The only thing, Nels, is that at least we know that those in hospital are recovering, which is an enormous relief, because this could have been so catastrophic.
Absolutely. Well, it was catastrophic, regardless. Or so the imagery of it was terrible. Well, that's why I'd say, well, justice and healing for the 50, and justice, of course, for the 97. You'll never walk alone. But I'll say,
I know, because of course, same football club.
Same football club, yeah. So
still the trauma of Hillsborough.
Critical moment of tragedy for them, and for Merseyside in general. And it's great to see the community coming together and uniting and standing against it, and seeing all football clubs coming together too. That was a beautiful thing.
Well, this is all, of course, an investigation, and police will be trying to get to the bottom of all of this. These are the allegations at the moment, and, of course, you know, speculation until he's either released or he's charged. Yeah. And they may even, you know, perhaps try and get an extension to the time that they're allowed to question him. But, you know, all very alarming. And, as I say, investigation ongoing. They'll get to the bottom of the facts, and thank goodness people are recovering. I think only 11 people now in hospital. All the others have been discharged, and we don't know what the drugs were. We just need to point that out.
Yeah, but I just want to say that too, that the safety of people in large crowds and the confidence of British people to go to celebrations is paramount in this situation. That this is a freak situation that it's far from normal, and people must be able to go to parades, go to carnival, go to anywhere else and feel safe and feel that that's a place where they can belong and truly celebrate.
The trouble is, and the police will do everything they can, Andrew, won't they, to make sure that a gathering of this many people, because the parade was miles and miles long, you know, it's a massive headache for them, for the police. They know they're very, very good at policing football crowds, but this is a crowd beyond the stadium, of course, this is in a city centre. You cannot account for every single thing, despite the amount of planning.
No.
Clearly, you can't account for everything.
No, and a lot of people saying, how was that road open? Well...
It was open because there was an ambulance trying to attend a heart attack.
Exactly. That's what we now know.
And it clearly, from the pictures, it looked like people in that road were trying to stop the car getting down the road.
They were.
So there were questions about the fact that, you know, if this car was driving down and tailgating that ambulance, why that wasn't spotted. And that wasn't, you know, the emergency services didn't intervene at that point. But I suppose you've got miles of parade, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people.
Well, I think there was a million people. Wasn't there a million people there?
And therefore, you know, it's just... It's huge
for policing is, you know, if the police are managing crowd and normal behaviour, they will be thinking about kind of normal criminal things maybe happening, pickpocketing or whatever. The moment you have somebody who is intent on causing harm, think of those police officers in those minutes. We now know, because the police made it very clear, that it wasn't a terrorist incident. But in those seconds, when they're dealing with it, they didn't know. And the problem is, if somebody is setting out to cause harm, you know, and that would have been what they were fearing at the time, it's just impossible to police and control that, unless you, as Nell says, say we're not going to have big gatherings of people, and we can't do that. We can't give in. So the bravery of those police officers running forward, not knowing what that car was,
it could have been booby trap.
Of course it could.
The whole thing could have gone.
That would certainly have been in their minds as police officers in that moment.
But they went straight in there. And we shouldn't forget just how brave they are. And of course, a lot of people saying, "Why didn't the police?" how fabulous those
All
police
running
were.
forward.
Heroic.
Yeah.
As ever.
I'm going to cause a little bit of trouble here. I question the speed with which the police were able to confirm that it was not a terrorist incident. Because I know it was the political motive that was there, that there was a lack of political motive, and it appeared that the gentleman was intoxicated. The question I would have asked that if he was actually a Muslim person who was equally intoxicated and had the big beard and everything else or so, it was a similar situation, would they be able to assert with similar speed or similar determination that there was no terrorist intent there whatsoever?
We don't know what the reasons are behind their ability to establish that.
Yeah.
You're making an assumption it's because of the colour of his
No,
skin.
not
but
entirely.
there may be other reasons that they immediately or very soon were able to rule that out.
I think it would be important for the police to try to inform us and let us know how these things are arrived at as quickly as they were in that situation, just for the purpose of the confidence in the system.
They seem to have been widely praised for the way they've responded to this. The Independent Review of Terrorism, Rotherham Hill, said that they've learned from Southport, and this was a better way to respond.
Yeah,
The same police force?
Yeah, same police force. And we know what happened up in Southport. 2 days, riots triggered by...
misinformation.
Wildly misinformed speculation.
And we know who was doing some of that that speculation. And in that moment, we could transition to Nigel Farage's speech yesterday, which he was talking... He was setting out a series of new proposals, raising the tax-free personal allowance, transferable tax allowance for married couples, scrapping the two-child benefit cap. The Times said he did say how he was going to pay for it, but the Times concludes he's likely to find his proposed savings raised less than hoped and are unlikely to come close to the costs of about 50 billion for his policy goals. So
I think he admitted at one point they're ambitious, his figures.
Yes. Is he, because we're so far out from a general election, Andrew, is he able to be, and would another political party be, ambitious about plans because it generates very powerful headlines?
Yeah.
And is there a point closer to the general election where he will, and Reform will have to say, cutting the foreign aid budget will release this much money? We have added up all the net zero policies and cutting them would add this much money. And all the diversity and equality and inclusion measures are added up to this much. And if we cut them, because it's quite easy at this stage to say, get rid of it all.
Yeah.
That'll give us enough money to give you all a tax break.
And great headlines dominating the political agenda. And what people can remember is he's getting rid of net zero, which, in my view, terrific. It's too ambitious, and his stuff about what he's doing. He's challenging Labour on the left and the Tories on the right. It's quite clever. It's not costed, and these figures will unravel. But he's got plenty of time to cost it.
If you are being judged as an opposition politician, that you might be in government, you play by different rules. You remember Rachel Reid making a commitment to 28 billion of borrowing, and then when she did the U-turn 3 years later, that was kind of...
He's got 4 years.
He has. However, interesting poll...
He's an insurgent. He's an insurgent.
He's an insurgent. Interesting poll by YouGov. I think it's on page 2 of the Mirror today. Who do you think would make the best Prime Minister out of each of these two? Starmer, 44, Farage, 29. Badenoch, 29, Farage, 25. Davey, 41, Farage, 27. If asked who do you want to be Prime Minister, people choose Kevin Badenoch and Ed Davey over Nigel Farage at the moment. The reason I'm kind of using that poll is because Nigel Farage is moving from being the outside insurgent guy who was just kind of complaining about the system to potentially being the next Prime Minister. At the moment, the public are sceptical about him as PM, partly because they think he just makes speeches where he makes promises and the sums don't add up. Do they have to change, Reform, their approach to politics? Do they have to become more serious and sound in their finances? Or are these polls going to say, Nigel Farage, fun guy, that wanted to be Prime Minister?
Well, he'll point to what happened in the local elections a few weeks ago.
But they weren't electing a government then.
Yeah, but they were extraordinary results.
Yeah, and extrapolated from those,
they would win.
Did we get to the position where he would be Prime Minister?
He could be Prime Minister from those results. Now, of course, low turnout, 4 years away. I think he's... look, I don't agree with a lot of what he said yesterday, by the way, on policy.
But what do you make of that poll, though? What does the poll tell us? Does it tell us nothing?
Not much.
Yeah, because even if you look at how they structured
No, I'll tell you why, because
I think it tells you he has a challenge and he needs to work out how he's going to manage that challenge.
I still think that why he's doing so well, people are fed up to the back teeth of the Tories, useless, hopeless. They've had 14 years, what did they do? And they don't think much of this Labour government. They didn't think much to him when he got in, Starmer, and they look at what he's done in the last year.
But they would prefer Starmer to Farage as Prime Minister. 44% Starmer. I know, but, you know...
One poll.
But if you look at...
If we did that in 3 different polls that gave you the same numbers, you wouldn't say one poll.
We'll see.
Let's just take it at face value for a moment.
Yeah.
Starmer 44, Farage 29. Why does the public say we don't want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister, according to the poll?
Do you know what? I would just intervene at this point because I just remember the night before the referendum in 2016, where the front pages went on the opinion polls, which said that Remain were going to win.
By 10 points at least.
And the voters went on Nigel Farage and others who persuaded them to vote Leave. So it's all very well when you phone people... no disrespect to the polling companies, but it's all very well when you phone people up and ask them a question, but it's how they act in the ballot box, which is... the final result,
I'm not disagreeing with that, and I'm not saying
that... And the local elections tell a different story to that poll.
Well, the question I'm asking is, does Nigel Farage carry on being the outside insurgent throwing rocks, or does he have to become the guy who says, I'm a serious candidate to be Prime Minister? Because at the moment, the public say they're not persuaded by that. I'm just asking whether... he needs to change his strategy.
I don't think he does at the moment. I don't think he does at the moment. I think he's doing very nicely. Look at the poll. There are other polls which shows Reform 10 points ahead.
Nels, what do you make of it?
I think that, look, this is MAGA. This is move fast and break things. This is populism. It's a new form of politics. So it's the renegades who's pretty much breaking into the actual old system and destroying the old system as it was. Out of everybody who's on the list there, other than perhaps Ed Vaizey, who is very, very charismatic and actually Ed Davey, I beg your pardon, sorry, Lord Vaizey, or something, who's also a lovely
different
guy.
Party.
But
you're right.
He sits where you sit.
Absolutely. I'm sure he does a better job than me too.
No.
But there you go. There you go. You got your feedback right there. But I must say that the thing
it's
about...
a good point you make, actually, Name recognition is important, isn't it?
Nigel Farage, but also, too, if you look at how the poll was structured, it was head-to-head. But if you take all 4 or 5 of the candidates and then say, which of these 4 or 5 people would you prefer to be PM, that's when you're getting a proper comparison. And I think that Farage, because that's what Farage would probably edge out a little bit better, because the thing about Farage is that he's actually fairly likeable, even if you disagree with him, which I do on many things. Out of everybody on the list there, him and Ed Davey seem to be the most likeable out of the actual two. Ed, you seem completely disgusted in my comments here.
No. I was thinking about what you're saying.
But I think
who would you want to go down the pub with? If you asked that question, Farage would win by a mile.
David Beckham is very popular. But it's not clear you want him to be your Prime Minister.
I don't want to go down the pub with David Beckham.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to go down the pub with David Beckham. The point being popular, being fun... being kind of insurgent, being populist. In America, it's worked for Trump, but in Britain, it has never worked before. And does Nigel Farage carry on like that? I'm just asking the question. Does he have to change strategy?
Do you know what? I don't think Nigel Farage right now is thinking he needs to change strategy.
That's right.
I think Nigel Farage thinks he's doing perfectly well. I think the issue is for Keir Starmer, who seems to be changing strategy left, right and centre.
Because of Farage.
Because of Farage. And I think it's a bigger issue for Keir Starmer. You know, is it Farage and Reform who have made Keir Starmer do the U-turn on the winter fuel allowance? Is it Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage who got Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, to say we're living in an island of strangers?
And it's done him no good whatsoever.
And it doesn't see...
And also changing on the 2-child benefit cap, which I think is a popular policy with most people out in the country, but Farage has got onto that too, and Labour now seem to be changing 4 years away from a general election. This bloke's got a majority of 80, Keir Starmer. He should carry on like he's got a majority of 80 instead of panicking and bending in the wind, cutting in the wind at every opportunity.
The most interesting thing
who's the leader here?
The most interesting thing that Farage said yesterday, he said that he has never been somebody who jumps on... He said about the 2-child benefit cap, so that it might be popular in the country. But what he said that was interesting was that he's not a person who actually chases popular opinion. He's the person who tries to take things that might be unpopular and make them popular and break them into the public consciousness. And so when it comes to the 2-child benefit cap there, for example, it might be popular that as a policy right now that just limits the amount of benefits you can receive to 2 children, which means it almost suppresses the amount of children poorer people can have. It might be popular in the country, but if that's the way in which he's doing it, he's breaking the idea or breaking the mould, breaking the consensus, and actually helping children at the same time and pulling Starmer into that mind frame. I'm with it. I think it's a good opposition to the actual government perspective. From the left, I think that's good. I think that's not inherently a bad thing.
It seems to have wrong-footed the government,
I think it shows that Starmer doesn't know what he believes in.
Yes,
doesn't believe in anything.
So, Andrew, if I was to ask you, what is Starmer's flagship policy? What does Starmerism stand for?
No idea.
Same.
Where is the narrative? That's been my criticism of this government from the beginning. What is the narrative? What do they believe in?
I would have thought...
Helping the poorest, you'd have thought?
Helping the poorest. It was public services. Number one, the NHS, and things like, you know, law and order.
Well, they'll say they're pumping billions into the NHS, but I can't see much improvement.
Child poverty is going to rise, and the papers say that the government's about to cut public spending.
Yeah.
So let's talk about prisons. We have this remarkable letter saying that if the government continues with its policy of releasing convicted criminals from prison early, police chiefs are going to need more money in order to police our streets, because those convicted criminals are going to be out on the streets. And if you're going to change government policy so that you're going to reduce the number of people going into prison, because you're not going to imprison so many people, does that effectively decriminalise some crimes for which you might get a sentence up to 12 months, but now you may not, and therefore police need more money to police those crimes? I mean, it feels like a breakdown in law and order.
I think we need more joined-up thinking on society about this. We need to think, as you just mentioned moments ago, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. And the key
That's a flagship policy from a Prime Minister from decades
ago. From when Ed Balls was actually the tea-boy in the room back in those days, so, as opposed to when he went on to being, I don't know, the Shadow Chancellor.
Were you the tea-boy? I didn't know that, Ed.
Look, Tony Blair always liked hot water with a slice of lemon. He never wanted tea. Peter Mandelson had some like green powder. It was all
you probably put some other powder in
far more weird.
You probably put some other powder in Blair's tea.
I certainly did not.
What it says is that when you look at
you're talking about
in terms of crime, the key driver of crime in society is poverty. That you're more likely to commit crimes if you are poor. And essentially what we're looking at there, we should be looking at prevention.
Sorry, Nels, that may be the case in some cases. There's a lot of people who are getting rich on crimes who are not in poverty.
Who are not? No.
And if they now think... Because you might be talking, for instance, about shoplifting, right?
Amongst many other things.
And I have to say, the government's policy now on shoplifting, I don't know where we are, because I thought that they were going to get tougher on shoplifters, but they've just got weaker on shorter sentences. Right. So, I mean, I don't know what that means.
The broader issue,
could you say about richer and poorer people? Remember the grotesque scenes when those people were let out of prison early by Shabana Mahmood, the new Justice Secretary. People turn, was it a Daimler or a champagne? It was grotesque. It was revolting.
Yeah, but you're sorry. So you're saying in some cases,
you want to let people out of prison.
Yep.
And the trouble is the prisons are full.
Well, she did let people out of prison.
No, but she doesn't want to. Their choice is this.
Some of them are back in prison already. Some are back in prison already because of
I understand. I know, but what would you do? The problem they've got is... Do you remember before the election we had the story of the Home Office Minister who was writing a letter to the police saying, please don't arrest people because we wouldn't then be able to take them through the court. Yeah. The problem they've got is, Shabana Mahmood has got, is because the prisons are full, does she tell the police not to arrest people in the first place? Does the court system break down? Where do they put these people?
Well, there's 10,500 foreign prisoners there. They can't. They haven't. They've done nothing with the EU reset about sorting out the migrants crossing the Channel. Can they not have a deal where we get some of these 10,500 foreign prisoners, which cost each one is £42,000 a year, out?
No. Well, I think that we should view... There's potential for opportunity.
10,500. That would sort the prison crisis out.
Okay, Nels.
There's potential for opportunity here too. But a person in prison is still a person. And there has to be a way in which we can better rehabilitate these people and incentivise them to come out and be better citizens. So, for example, in America, it's actively encouraged that prisoners pursue degrees, they do courses to get time shaved off, so they get out there more polished people, more ambitious people. You look at the work that the great Lord Timpson's doing in terms of actually trying to get people out of prison, but get people better citizens.
Incredibly noble. Unfortunately, in the short term, the police chiefs have told the Prime Minister the early release is a net detriment to public safety.
Definitely.
Investing in rehabilitation of prisoners is something that takes a long time. And there will be a number of prisoners who do not care about doing a degree or changing their lives or turning around their criminal intent or their profitable business and will just come out and start to burgle
one of the points
houses.
about prison, of course, rehabilitation, but also is to keep these appalling people off the streets.
Exactly right.
Where they're going to reoffend and put the fear of God into people.
And abused partners through domestic violence.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, you would think these were the people you would not want.
And they've been let out.
Early release.
And they've been let out under early releases.
Oh,
and they said that wouldn't happen. Sex offenders, domestic abusers, most of those offenders attack women. How do we get into that position with the Labour government? Women are the most vulnerable when these people are released.
Yeah, for prolific offenders, judges will still be able to impose short sentences in exceptional circumstances. Domestic abusers have been excluded from the presumption against short sentences if the judge deems that a period of respite is needed for the victim. I would have thought a period of respite was always needed for the victim. My goodness.
Completely agree. Yeah, you can't do. So sex offenders, yes, and abusers can't. We can't have them just going back on the street after a short stint. But other people who've committed what are functionally economic crimes, shoplifters, so on and so forth. Even dare I even say the person who might even... I think I'll get in trouble if I say some other things. Even people who look at economic crimes such as drug dealing, for example, so low-scale drug dealing, the ability to rehabilitate those people and give them opportunities, make them better citizens, so pursue a degree whilst you're in prison, get your GCSEs, get your A-levels, and then shave off time as a result of that, and then you come out and you have a good process of reintegrating them in society.
That's not what those six chief constables are saying.
Of course it's all true, Nels, but the problem is, if you've had somebody who's been convicted and sentenced, and then they're let out early, despite it being a serious crime, because we can't manage the prison system. For our society, it's a catastrophe.
It's a catastrophe.
I mean, it's a catastrophe which over 10 years happened because longer sentences and no new prison places, and suddenly you're in a crisis.
I know. And the government say, we're building new prisons. How long is that going to take?
Years.
Years. Yeah. Where are they going to put them? Because nobody wants them.
Meanwhile, police are going to be able to crush bikes and scooters within 48 hours in order to tackle antisocial behaviour. Currently, they have to wait 2 weeks before they're able to dispose of a vehicle, which makes it easier for offenders to reclaim their vehicles and with a limited deterrent to repeat offending. It feels like the police officers...
while Rome's burning.
Yeah, police officers are being asked to do an awful lot while at public funding.
Why can't we just crush these scooters before a crime's been committed? But the question
you just want scooters off our
I think they are so dangerous. People drive them so recklessly.
I know.
And they're totally unregulated. And it's one of those things where, technology and progress, no way.
I agree with you, Ed.
I think not progress, is a disaster.
If you're a man over 40, just a bit of medical advice or so from the person who's never done a minute of medical school whatsoever. If you're a man over 40, I don't think you should be on a scooter, because I've known too many people who've fallen off of them, broken both.
You shouldn't be on the pavement if somebody's driving a scooter down the pavement.
You certainly shouldn't be.
So the line bike should not be on the pavement. And I have to say...
And what is the regulation? It's supposed to be... There's been reviews after reviews after reviews, and there's still no law in place.
I was on a major roundabout on the A23 the other day. Everyone's jostling for position. A scooter, an e-scooter comes out on the roundabout. You just think, I could barely look, and I was driving my car. I mean, all power to those people who've got the courage to do it. But,
they're a menace.
Really?
Controversial.
No power to them. Let's ban them.
With you.
Might be safer. Apparently it's a good environmental measure, of course. That person on the scooter would say, well, if you were on a scooter, we'd all be safer,
it's getting
and
worrying.
The planet would be safer.
Ed Balls and I are agreeing more and more. It's a bit worrying, Ed, for you. It's a bit worrying for you. You're agreeing with me, Ed, as you're getting older.
I'm happy to share some common sense with you, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed. We will talk to you again at 9:15 after we have spoken to Matthew Pennycook, who is the Housing Minister.